Are we good? Because like the last 2 times, I swear to God, like I haven't been able to like have a good start. Right? We're trying to get the audio going and be like,
well, you actually unmuted for one. So
hey, okay, that was the problem first time around. So, but we're back again. I appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate you, Bailey, too, coming on. We just had some of our guys drop out last minute for the Central, but we're going to get Chad, who's joining us later as well. So there'll be about 6 of us tonight. I haven't said hi to Ryan or Christian yet, so hello. Good to see you guys again. Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So I figured we can kind of just get right into it. I mean, I'm kind of ready just because of last week's shenanigans, Bailey.
I watched. It was interesting.
No comment.
Yeah, I decided to come a little bit more prepared today, but it's gonna be okay. Everything's fine. So, does anybody want to go first? I know I kind of like did it at the beginning last 2 times where I just picked a random team, but does anybody want to go first, or does have a request? Actually, wait a minute. We should probably talk about Austin Matthews.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I know it's not like something we should do, but I feel like we have to because it broke yesterday, along with, I believe, Alexi Lafreniere signed his 2-year deal as well. But unfortunately, that wasn't the biggest news of the week. Even though it's been a quiet August, I feel like it's probably the biggest news we've had this offseason. So Matthews signs his extension. He gets an extension for $13.25, I believe, in AAV for the next 4 years. So his deal will kick in next year. And I kind of just wanted to ask everybody here, just what are your thoughts about the deal itself and the impact that it's going to leave on for the entire league for this upcoming season?
I'm raising my hand. Can I go first here?
You're so nice, Richie. You know what? That was great. Go ahead.
Yeah, as the resident Arizonan here on the show tonight, I have strong feelings about Austin Matthews, as you would expect. Now, a lot of us Coyotes fans were just hoping upon hope that he would say goodbye to the Toronto Maple Leafs after this coming season, and he would become a free agent and give the Coyotes a chance to sign him in 2024. That didn't happen. I am super happy for Austin Matthews. Like, he deserves exactly what he got. I'm so glad that he has become one of the biggest stars in the NHL. Everybody in the state of Arizona who's a hockey fan is very, very proud of Austin Matthews. Every time he does well, I'm a happy person. I don't like when the Leafs do well, but I like seeing Austin Matthews do well. So good luck to him. I hope he does well over the next 4 years. But now that we've just moved the timeline, right? So now we've just moved it back 4 years. He'll be, I believe, 30 when his next contract expires in 2028. That's when the Coyotes hopefully will have a brand new rink to play in here in the state of Arizona. So imagine that. Austin Matthews becomes a free agent, succeeds in Toronto, and then the first thing that he does after he becomes a free agent, just like John Tavares did when he joined the Maple Leafs, he comes back home and helps open up a brand new rink here in the state of Arizona, right as the Coyotes are on the upswing to becoming one of the best teams in the NHL. Like, I'm already planning things out here, but it sounds good.
Yeah. For the first time in like 12 years, but okay.
I was going to say, nice crystal ball there, Richie.
I love it.
He's already got it planned out, man. It's already planned out.
Apparently. I'll get my quick thoughts on it just because I'm probably the guy closest to the Toronto area. I was a little bit surprised of the term. I honestly, I think it probably would have been better if you're looking at it at a 6 to 7, 8 year kind of deal. Then I can understand that. But that tells me 2 things, really. It tells me that he doesn't want to commit long term because as we look at it, this is not a long term contract. This isn't like another one of those proven deals because he just got paid $13 million. So, you're looking at that in that aspect. And then all of a sudden, on the other side of it, William Nylander still has to get paid, right? This is a guy who is still going to get paid $6 million this upcoming season. He's going to have to get an extension, obviously, next year if they want to keep him. He's probably going to ask anywhere between $9.5 to $10 million, if that, because last time I checked, he was the only guy who scored for Toronto in the second round of that playoff series recently. So, another guy who just got paid $13 million didn't score a goal in those 5 games. We know who. I don't think it leaves a lot of room for talent, considering about 40% of your roster is committed to Matthews, Marner, Tavares, at least for the next 2 to 3 seasons. Morgan Riley's getting paid $7.5 million, which is a pretty good deal. But I think it's good short term. It means that you have to contend now. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when you're looking at the longevity of it, and him not really signing that 7 to 8 year contract, I think for me is at least surprising, because that just shows me that he doesn't want to commit to this team long term. And if there is no success in the short distant future, then he might be walking out of the door when he hits 30, like Richie says. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Go ahead.
But I think I think the reason why he's doing that, sorry, Ryan, is he's maximizing the salary cap. Like, the salary cap's going to be going up. He's going to be maximizing the amount of money he can make in the long term. Like, we've seen guys like Jack Hughes and Tim Stützle sign these contracts for 7-8 years, and already those deals are like, they're already being underpaid. Like, Jack Hughes should be up there with the McKinnons and the Matthews of the world, and he's only making like $8 million a year. So you need to, the way I look at it is, he can get out of Toronto if they don't win, but he can also go back now and get even more money and maximize the last couple of years of his prime. So that's the way I look at it. Yeah,
and I'm not knocking him at all. I think this is a fantastic deal if you're Austin Matthews, right? You said it yourself. You're maximizing the salary cap, which you're totally right on. He maximized this deal to its entirety, especially when the cap's going to go up the next couple of years. And if he continues to go at this pace, especially what he does in the regular season, then it's only going to sweeten the deal for him there.
Right.
So
this just has a lot to say too. I will say, for guys like Bertuzzi, who are getting paid 5.5, guys like Brody and Klingberg, who are still making decent money in Toronto as well. So it's just a matter of you got to kind of pick and choose your battles here with the upcoming season. That's $13.25 million less dollars that you have to play with, signing a lot of those guys who people in Toronto consider crucial to this team.
Gotcha.
Really.
Okay. Ryan, any thoughts real quick before we start?
Christian took the words right out of my mouth. That's what he's doing. Why would you go and sign an 8-year contract when it's been proven in the past with the Toronto organization that they're willing to pay top dollar for their players? And it's like, and he knows that he's got the upper hand. He's a superstar in the league. So why would he go and sign a contract for, $13 million a year or even $12.5 million a year for 8 years when he can maximize his space now and go and get 13.25, which is probably a little bit less than what he got earlier. And then when his 4-year contract is kind of over, then he can really, heck, could he go and get $16-17 million at that point? Who knows?
You got it.
So that's really what it is. So.
Yeah, no, it kind of, now thinking about it more, it does make sense. But again, I still look at it in the side of it that he's still not committing. And you're right. He's basically saying, okay, here's the Leafs balls right here, and I got you right in my fist, right? That's essentially what it is, right? So as much as Leaf fans want to, cheer and jeer about it, Matthews has got these guys exactly right where he wants them, at least for the rest of his career or however long he stays in Toronto. But anyway, that's enough about Leaf talk. Let's move on. Let's get to the real reason why we're here tonight. It is the Central Division that we're going to get into, and I bring the floor. Does anybody want to request to start with a certain team tonight?
I think we go in alphabetical order. Let's start with those Coyotes.
Okay, let's do it. I was like, wow, that was a long silence.
Sorry, I was waiting for somebody else to go.
Okay. I don't know. I don't want to. Or does nobody want to play show and tell tonight? Okay, I like that. Let's do alphabetical order tonight. And I'm going to kind of leave the Predators towards the end because Chad from our national podcast should be joining us soon. So we'll leave that towards the end. But let's do it. Let's start with Richie's Arizona Coyotes, who, when me and Neil were doing the draft, we were very surprised as to, the selection that they had in Simashev, and forget me if I'm wrong, who their second pick was, Richie?
Daniel Boot.
Boot. Oh, yeah, him. Yeah. So, and a lot of people were very critical of their draft this year because I think it was probably one of the more surprising picks. But again, this was just another year of the Coyotes who really can't find a way to take that step forward. However, if you look at this offseason, they did make some moves, right, that felt like were needed. So, surprisingly, Dumba, I think, comes over to Arizona. Now you sign the entry level for Logan Cooley, who was your 3rd overall pick last year. You're bringing in a young Sean Dursey, Kerfoot coming over from Toronto, who we just spoke about. Bukestad, who can, again, man the bottom 6. Sanford will be there as well. Travis Dermott, who's going to probably fill in that maybe 6-7 role. He might be higher depending on the blue line from the Arizona Coyotes. And in terms of what they lost, they didn't really lose a ton. I mean, there was that whole ordeal with Alex Galchenyuk. And yes, you lose Christian Fischer, but really the Arizona Coyotes didn't lose anything. And who knows, maybe we might be eating our own words in the future about Simashev and Boot. And we'll see what these young prospects can kind of do. And I'm sorry you guys lost out on the Matthews talk, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But let's start with Richie here. You have to think at some point that this team's going to do something, right? Obviously, they had a series win in that bubble in 2020, and really since 2011, I think it was, when they made it all the way to the Western Conference Final, or 2012, I can't remember what it was. You have to think that there has to be progress to move forward, right? That's with every team's sort of outlook. Explain to us a little bit, why is it that they're struggling to kind of move forward, especially with all the fallouts of the arena contracts and all that too, just trying to stabilize a home for them. Talk about that. Talk about the offseason, your thoughts on it, and the predictions that you think going forward with the Coyotes.
Yeah, first off, you did miss a name on the graphic there. I do want to mention Jason Zucker from the Pittsburgh Penguins fame. I don't see him on your list here. They added Jason Zucker on a 1-year deal under $6 million. Veteran guy who's won a lot of games. I really like him on the top 6. Another veteran guy to add to this roster, which on a really young roster is really important. And that is the perfect example and perfect segue into kind of where the Coyotes are going here. Is they're looking to take a big step up this year. They're not a playoff team this year. Everybody knows that. But they overachieved last year. Everybody on paper thought that that Coyotes roster last year was going to end up with the worst record in the league, and they did not. The Chicago Blackhawks, a couple other teams beat them out, actually. And the Coyotes overperformed last year, and they played in over their heels last year. And I have a feeling that this year they're going to ride a little bit of that into this year as well, and they're going to overperform, and they're going to beat people's expectations, because you have a lot of guys who I think are going to continue to develop. And the two guys I want to mention, Matias Maccelli, who was hurt last year, kind of was in the Calder conversation last year. I think he should have at least got a nomination. He did not, unfortunately, because he was hurt. He's a player who I love to watch. If you ever watch the Coyotes, Matias Maccelli is like one of my favorite players to watch on the ice. So I think he's going to take a step up this year with some of the guys they brought in. Logan Cooley coming in is so freaking exciting. Like he alone is going to be your reason to watch this team this year, because I honestly believe, and I teased, if you were watching on Twitter, follow me on Twitter, I teased that I had a hot take, and I wish our Chicago Blackhawks guy was here, because I want him to hear this. And I honestly believe that I think Logan Cooley is going to win the Calder this year over Connor Bedard.
I don't think that's crazy.
I don't think that's crazy either. I agree.
Like, I think everybody feels like Connor Bedard he's the chosen one, et cetera, et cetera. But go look at that Blackhawks roster, man. Who else is on that roster? He's going to have nobody to give the puck to score. He's going to have nobody to get him the puck, so he's got to do it all by himself. They're not going to have the puck at all, because they're going to be defending the entire time. He's going to get his 50, 60 points as a decent young rookie will do, but he's not going to win the Calder. And I truly believe that in the position that the Coyotes are right now, Logan Cooley is going to come in and probably play on the top 6. And I think he's going to have a big season. Whether that's not going to be a 90-point season by any means, but you look at the top scoring rookie last year, I think that's a perfect kind of floor for him in that 65, 70 point kind of area. And I believe because he's going to overperform a little bit, I think he wins the Calder over Connor Bedard. And I really do think that Logan Cooley is going to be one of the most fun players to watch in the league this year. So to kind of wrap it up, I really do think the Coyotes are here to take a step forward. They just extended their head coach, Andre Torini, for another 3 years. This is year number 3 of the rebuild under Bill Armstrong and Andre Torini. So this is where you really want to see a step forward. And as far as like where I think they'll finish, I wouldn't be surprised if they finish in the middle of the pack in the Central Division this year. And you see Chicago and you see St. Louis, who is really in no man's land as well, kind of coming below them. So what is that? I think that puts them 4th, right? Maybe in the Central Division ahead of those two teams, and gets you around that 80-point mark or so, around that 500 mark. And that's a good step forward for this team. And I'm actually really excited to see what they can do on the ice. They played really well at home last year. Mullet Arena is a big, big advantage we call it mullet magic. And for whatever reason, the team was able to overperform at home last year. So if they just take what they can do did at home last year and put it on the road more often, they're going to be a tough out all season long. Okay, they were last year. They played hard in pretty much every game. They were in every game. They weren't getting blown out every game like some other teams were. So I think that a step forward is going to be in the cards for the Coyotes this year.
Okay. I real quick too, just two quick things before I pass it off to everybody else. I hear what you're saying with Bedard and the fact that he won't have a lot of weapons, right? I think, I just brought it up there. Zach was just mentioning like Taylor Hall, Foligno, Perry. Like, okay, they're not guys that you're going to see normally on line one with Bedard. I don't think it's an insane take at all that I think Logan Cooley can have that sort of jump. But I'll kind of look at it the same way with Arizona and say, okay, well, who's Cooley going to be able to work around? Maybe he does get along really well with Zucker and Dumba, and maybe they man that power play unit. And I think you could make the argument that on paper, it's probably a better chance for Cooley to win the Calder over Bedard because of you're just plainly looking at the roster. But I think it's going to be tough for Cooley too, especially just entering the league and, trying to get familiarized with these guys too. Same thing with Bedard and every draft pick that goes through with it. But clearly I'm not saying anything because you guys know your teams more than I will ever know. So obviously you know something more than I do. But yeah, I think at some point you do have to take that sort of leap going forward. And, I like the additions that they made. I think, you have to make some sort of moves with whatever they're doing with the cap. I don't know what they're doing with it these days. And lastly, I love the fact that they're at Mullen Arena. I think it's the best of a really bad situation because you're getting all those college kids who may or may not be drinking, may not be in an arena with a very, very small arena, right? I've been in those, and they can get loud very quickly, even though it's not a ginormous arena. That's my thoughts. Anybody else?
I mean, like, Richie, what are your thoughts? Does he get to go on that top line with Keller and Schmaltz? Or
no, I think that line is going to stay intact from last year. It was Schmaltz, Keller, and I forget
Hayton.
Yeah, Barrett Hayton, exactly. Thank you, Mike. How did I forget Barrett Hayton? He had a good end of the season last year, but that line at the end of last season was rolling, man. Like, I think Nick Schmaltz is really, really underrated. He had a great season last year. He's dealt with some injuries over the course of the season, so that line is set. I wouldn't mind seeing Logan Cooley, and there's been some discussions whether or not he's going to play center to begin the season or if he's going to play on the wing. I honestly would rather maybe see him on the wing with a veteran centerman like a Nick Bukestad on that second line, and I think that would be perfect. Nick Bukestad, big, beefy guy, perfect for that Bill Armstrong team. He loves his guys who are like 6'4", 6'5", big, meaty guys, and Nick Bukestad is that guy. Played well with the Coyotes last year, fit in really well with the Torini system, and I wouldn't mind seeing Logan Cooley because, listen, Logan Cooley does you no good on the bottom six, in my opinion, with that skill, right? Yeah. So I think he's got to play at least to start the season on your top six and let him learn on the job, man. Like let him get those minutes with those more skilled players, put him on that, it's probably his second power play unit as well. And and if you put him with those right guys, I think he can in the top six of the Coyotes. I think that they're pretty well set in that top six, in my opinion, as far as being better this year than they have in the past. Bottom six is a different story, obviously. And I saw a comment talking about the blue line too, which is going to be a mess this year. It's kind of a disaster. It's very young. Matt Dumba is terrible. He's not good anymore. I'm sorry. Go look at his. I saw an analytic chart a couple months ago, and it reminds me of Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Over the last 3 years, it just went zip straight down. And so he's a name. He's a name, but like he's going to be he's terrible. So I think he's here for a year. He'll be traded at the trade deadline, and they can get a couple draft picks for him.
Ryan or Bailey, any quick thoughts on Arizona going into the season?
Not from my end.
Cool.
I think one of the things that gets underrated about this Arizona Coyotes team is their head coach, and obviously you can tell that by the fact that he got re-signed for, was it 3 years, Richie? 2 years, something like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean that you talked about a team that overachieved this year. I give him full credit for the reason why that they overachieved, and it goes to also show you that they talk about some of the markets around the NHL that nobody wants to play here. Okay, well Nick Bukestad got traded to Edmonton and then came back. Mm-hmm. So you can't tell me that there's like players that don't want to play in Arizona. So those are just the two thoughts I had. Just Turney getting re-signed, and obviously he's the reason why. And yes, there are players that want to play in Arizona. Zucker is a great example of that. He could have gone anywhere he wanted. He really could. He could have gone to Boston, where they need some help there, and could have signed a lower contract with the possibility of going into the playoffs. But no, he decided to go to Arizona, where he's probably not going to make the playoffs. And, he's going to be relied upon as one of the big guys. So sure. I think that's cool.
Okay.
I honestly think, too, I just have one more thing real quick about Arizona. Yeah, I think Vejmelka is one of the most underrated goalies in the league. That dude is – I'm surprised no one tried to trade for him at the deadline last year, because I thought he was one of the best goaltending options available. And Connor Ingram's really come into his own as a backup for Arizona and their whole. So I think they are shaky on the blue line, but that goaltending I think is going to bail them out a lot of nights. I really like Vejmelka a lot.
We're going to find out this year, right? Yeah. And speaking of guys who want to play in their own city, we'll talk about these guys tomorrow. I actually want to start. I don't want to go in alphabetical order because of a comment that was just made. I actually want to switch gears and throw Ryan under the spotlight here. I want to bring up Dallas because Connor mentions in the comments, unpopular opinion, will not win a cup with Jamie Benn as a captain. He's happy to keep getting game misconducts. If you guys don't know what he was talking about, it was all the way back. I believe it was in game 1 or 2 of the Western Conference Finals. Forgive me if I'm wrong, where he made a really poor decision, I would like to say. He fell
on top of it.
Okay. Really changed the course of that series, and ultimately the Stars ended up losing to the Golden Knights in that Western final. So to switch gears, let's do Dallas. Hope Brian's ready for it. They were 4th in the West this year, and they did, as I mentioned, lose in the Western final. And then talking about going into this season, into this offseason, you talk about a lot of guys who were added and lost to this team. Again, not a lot compared to a lot of the other teams that made, a lot of splashes, a lot of additions, lost a lot of guys. Dallas didn't really seem to have that, right? They had one major acquisition in Matt Duchene. If you want to count Bayreuther too, fine. But then losing Max Domi, Colin Miller, Glendening, and Studnick, as you see there. So maybe a couple of more losses that you see there for Dallas as the season kind of gets underway. And I think maybe that's a good place to start, where Connor and I guess Joe Mama in the comments are kind of saying about Jamie Benn, right? He's been this captain for so long. I guess my first of 2 questions are, how much longer can you trust Jamie Benn as your captain until he retires? Is there going to be a point where maybe there's certain players who, might be getting sick of those antics that he kind of did there in the Western final? And I'm sure Stars fans have different opinions on it. It's fine. But then my second question would be, do you think that with the addition of Matt Duchene, it's going to supersede a lot of the losses that we just explained there this offseason, and it's going to propel them going into the start of this season and hopefully another playoff run?
See, and this is what sucks about all of this, is that the Stars had such a good season. There's so many other names that we should be talking about, but because of that one mistake at that one time, which he let's be honest, I don't think Stars fans would say that. Honestly, I think they would agree and mention and say the thing that Jamie Benn was a really stupid mistake, and Jamie will eventually admit that. It won't be right now. It might be after he retires.
No.
but he will admit that it was a turning point in the series. It was you can't look at anything else and tell me that it wasn't a turning point in the series. And as Stars fans, we recognize that. As for the whole Jamie Benn, you can't win a cup as him being a captain. He will win a Stanley Cup as the captain of the Dallas Stars. And I almost feel like I don't feel like that's a hot take at all. I think with the direction of this team, he's not the guy he used to be. He's not going to score you, have 80 points in a season, but he scored 30 goals this year. And that's something that kind of gets overlooked about with this team a lot, is that he is the heart and soul of this team. He really is. You get rid of Jamie Benn, there's no Dallas Stars. I'm sorry. Me and my brothers actually had a podcast episode last night. We talked about the 3 most important players, and he was number 1 for one of my brothers. He said that if we don't have Jamie Benn at all, this team doesn't get to the Western Conference final. I mean, yes, people look at how he did that stupid thing in game 3, but what they also don't look at is the motivation that it gave those players in game 4 and game 5 to at least have some little bit left in the tank to fight back and really go in and say, hey, we want to get our guy back. And now it kind of all sucked because game 6 was terrible. But you can't look at game 4 and game 5 and say that the motivation for the Stars not winning those games was not because of the fact that Jamie Benn had that 2-game suspension. So, sorry, I'm getting distracted by Bailey.
So am I. It's okay. She's on mute.
Yeah. So,
I was going to say, my boyfriend is really proud of his stick taping job. He wanted you all to know it.
It looks good.
I don't like Crosby.
It's better than I could do. But
anyway, yes. Finish. Go ahead.
Yeah. So anyways, just I mean, you can call me out if you want to, if I'm wrong and he retires and he's still the captain and he doesn't win a Stanley Cup. But I feel very confident in the fact in the next couple of years, the Dallas Stars are going to be hosting the Stanley Cup. That's just me.
And I don't blame you. You have to be confident. And, looking at how long Ben's been there for, I think it would feel weird and it would be a bit of a dishonor for him not to be captain, at least finishing up. And Bailey probably just got mauled by her boyfriend. So, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. I think he has to be the captain for however long he's on this team for the rest of his career, or whether he goes to another team for whatever reason. I do agree with that. It did change that entire series right from there, right? All of a sudden just felt like, at least for the Stars fan base, it just felt like, man, now what, so to speak, right? They did fight back very respectively in that final, coming up a little bit short, but, I think in those situations, it really does show that you do need your captain. Whether or not he's skilled or not anymore, you can tell that he is the leader of this team. And, with the addition of Matt Duchene this offseason, it could help, and it's going to be a good team that's up the middle, and a lot of veteran presence still there too, like Joe Pavelski, and Duchene's going to add into that as well. Guys who clearly don't get talked about much in this league are your Jason Robertsons and your Rupe Hintz, right? They clearly don't get enough talk about how skillful they are and really how they kind of help carry that team as well too, all the way to a Western final. So, I do think they're on the cusp of it. I think that if you're looking at this team as a whole going into this season, these are one of the teams I'm going to look at the deadline and go, are you all in or are you not, right? It's got to be one of those cases where you have to throw all your chips in at some point, right, where a team's going to start feeling like they have to. And Dallas, for me, feels like one of those teams that they kind of have to throw all their chips in, at least this year, maybe next year, so to speak. So, if you have that window, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I'll push back on that a little bit. I think you're right. I do think they need to go in. I don't think they're going to go all in, because something that they've constantly been talking about with especially the upper management, is that this team needs to always be in the hunt. It seems like they've always had to be in the hunt. They can't be like Chicago or be like they can't go into a deep rebuild, right? They have to remain relevant in order for this team to be making money and to stay in contention for this stuff. And that's what's amazing about the fact, and I used to be against him, but Jim Nill is a master. He has absolutely been a master in the fact that he has literally been rebuilding on the fly. So he goes that we've got our big vets and Sagan, Ben, and I guess you could add Duchene to that. You've got our top guys with Robertson and Hintz, and then you've even got some young guys who are coming up, and Harley, and obviously and Wyatt Johnston, who scored 24 goals this year.
Yeah.
Logan Stankoven may make the team. What's crazy is he's one of the top prospects in the world right now. I don't even think he's going to make the team. I don't.
Right.
And so that I don't think they're going to go fully in. They're not going to be willing to trade a whole bunch of assets to go after somebody like that. The only thing this team really needs, in my opinion, is just a top 4 defenseman, if that. And I think that's something they're going to be looking for at the trade deadline. I don't think it's going to happen before the season, but they'll be looking towards sorry, Kyle, but like Chris Tanev and Calgary probably.
Whatever.
Or like, or like Brett Pesce and Carolina, or one of those guys that.
Don't remind me.
And Dumbo from Arizona, maybe somebody from the Avalanche. When Jason comes in, we'll see from Nashville. Why don't y'all wreck on all of us, Jesus?
But they just need I feel like they need just that one more guy. They're solid at forwards. They have one of the best forward cores in the NHL. Their goaltending, maybe the backup could have been upgraded, but Wedgwood is still pretty good. He just needs to stay healthy. It's just that if anybody needs to know anything about this team, is that the weakness is defense. And even then, they finished third in the NHL in goals against. So who am I to be saying this and say, oh, well, they need a top 4 defenseman or whatever? I think that's when you have a really good team like the Stars like this, the weaknesses are glaring, really, really glaring. And that's the obvious issue with the Stars right now.
Okay. We have somebody waiting in the lobby. I figure I just wanted to let you kind of talk before we bring him in, just because Zach, another body to add in. There he is. Hey, Zach, how you doing? And he's out. Hold on, wait. I got him.
I was looking like half a second.
So yeah, I had to bring Zach in there. I just don't want to interrupt Ryan's little talk there about the Stars, but yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the head there as well too. Like I believe their one player is way too. Now you just got to go prove it. So anybody else? I know Zach can't.
I don't think you have enough faith in Wedgwood. Looking just kind of back at stats, because I didn't have anything off the top of my head. Played 21 games with you guys last season, 2.72 goals against, 0.915. That's not bad to have in a backup tender.
It's not, but
anyway.
Yeah, he maybe that was the wrong way that it came across. He was very good for us. His biggest issue, and he was actually one of the players that I thought is the most important to this team's success, mostly to give Jake Ottinger some rest. Dude, the guy played 62 games. He can't play that much. But Wedgwood just needs to stay healthy. We really, really, really need him to stay healthy, because after that, our goaltending depth after our second guy is non-existent. And it's the other Matt Murray is our third goalie. So that's where we're at.
The other guy.
Cool. That guy.
Wow.
That guy.
So much confidence in Matt Murray. Dang.
Well, you saw the Leafs. You saw the Leafs did. The Leafs did because he was hurt. Anybody else, real quick, on Dallas before we move on?
I got a question for you, Ryan. So when you were talking about winning a Stanley Cup with Jamie Benn while he was still on the roster, what do you see as the championship window for the Dallas Stars? Is it 2 years?
Good question.
3 years?
That is a very good question. I think it's 3 years, if we're talking about a championship window, honestly. Because
dude, I think it's longer. I think when you have Robertson and Hintz and Ottinger, that's your future, and those guys are some of the best players in the league. I think it's longer, and I honestly think they're going to be better once you get those contracts of Ben and Sagan off the books.
Well, but you've also got another heart and soul guy that really stepped up when Jamie Benn couldn't or whatever is Pavelski.
Yep.
And that's something I hadn't talked about. But he wears the A on his chest, but he's honestly probably the co-captain of this team right now. And I'd like to think he keeps going, but at some point you think he's got to slow down, right? And that's me as a Stars fan trying not to be too pessimistic. I want to be optimistic. I think he can keep going as long as he's playing with those two guys, Robo and Rope. But I mean, how? Because if you take him off that line, then who goes onto that top line with Rope and with Robertson, and are they as effective? And I'm not trying to be high and mighty, but they've been the best line in the NHL for the past 2 years consistently. I would feel when it comes to offense, when it comes to defense, Rope is seen as a Selke candidate now that, well, so is everybody else now, I guess, now that Bergeron is out. But he's such a great defensive guy. I really think they're one of the best lines in the NHL, and their stats to back it up.
Interesting. Very interesting. Everybody goes quiet.
I said part of the reason why I asked that is because as a newer member of the Central Division, the Coyotes, one of the things, first, I did not like when the Coyotes moved to the Central Division at first. My co-host Corey hated it. But one of the things that Corey and I actually liked about moving to the Central Division when they did is the Central Division is built on a bunch of teams with older rosters, right? Your St. Louis's, your Chicago's, your Nashville's, right? And then the Dallas Stars are now kind of moved into that next level where they're in their championship window right now, but in 2 or 3 years, they're probably going to have to retool a bunch, and I don't expect them to be quite as good once they lose some of those more veteran guys like you talked about. And so as a Coyotes fan, I love it because as soon as all these teams start, moving down, Chicago's already started. Yay. That means the Coyotes will be good, right? Right at the right time. It's perfect. So thank you, NHL, for screwing the Coyotes over and moving us to the Central Division, because in 3 years, baby, numero uno, right there with the Avalanche, right there. Coyotes and Avalanche, Western Conference Final coming up.
I might be buying my second home in Arizona when they get good. So. Anyway, let's move on.
I will say I appreciate the confidence. I'll say that.
I'm high on the Coyotes, man. I think they're going to be good in a couple of years. I'm right there with Richie. I
need some really positivity, Gotta stay positive out here. Thank you.
I like that. All right, let's move on. Let's keep the train rolling here. We talked about Chicago earlier, obviously with Connor Bedard being the #1 overall pick. Another team that was sort of active, making, I don't want to say surprising moves, but maybe eyebrow-raising moves as they acquire Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno over from Boston. They bring in Corey Perry from Tampa Bay. Josh Bailey now comes over from the Islanders, and Donato as well too gets added in. Not losing a ton of stock, I want to say, with Mitchell, Englund, Caleb Jones, and Alex Stalock. More or less, it's about the additions with this team and getting Connor Bedard and just trying to frantically get something around him just to try to gain some sort of confidence and motivation for him going into his first full season with the Chicago Blackhawks. So I'll kind of leave it to the floor with everybody here, but initial thoughts on what our expectations are for Bedard this season and Chicago for the 82-game schedule coming up.
Kyle, wasn't Bailey bought out by Chicago? Is he still even part of the roster, or is he?
Look, I made this list a while ago, so I haven't really checked.
He did get bought out.
Bailey. Anyway, Bailey's
is
not
not
Chicago, guys.
Yeah. I think
he does not show up on Cap Friendly.
Yeah. So, I mean,
okay, he got bought out. Whatever. Anyway.
I mean, with Chicago, it's like you hear it last year, all you heard was, we're going to finally do a rebuild. It's going to be 5 years, blah, 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 blah. You heard it all last year from Kyle Davidson. And then they get Bedard, which everyone around the league is like, great.
It sucks.
Here we go again. But then it's like, okay, like you said, they get Hall, Foligno, Corey Perry, and it's like they're trying to hit the cap floor. It seems like that too, because they're way down. And it's like, so are you doing a rebuild, or are you just trying to like get to cap floor, but then also add veteran presence to like not just completely leave Connor Bedard to the wolves and like, all right, go have fun with who do you have on the team? Yeah. So I mean, it's just with Chicago. I mean, you're looking at that roster going, they might hit 60 points, but after that, like who really knows? I mean, like I said, they didn't lose a whole lot too, but I mean, Patrick Kane's not coming back. Taves is he's not retired, but he's taking the year off. So you're losing more of basically the entire core from that. Those cup teams are gone. Basically, who's really left are on that roster. So we could be looking at another year of Chicago being bottom of the league again. Who knows if they even hit 60 points? Mm-hmm. It's basically it's just you got to hope and pray that Connor Bedard doesn't get frustrated at some point and they completely just kill his like mojo right now. If we just look at this roster.
Okay.
The thing that baffles me regarding the Blackhawks, and Zach, you kind of mentioned it with the whole like wanting to hit the cap floor, and it's like this whole big deal. They've already got a full roster, and they still have almost $13 million in cap space left.
That's right.
Yeah,
so it makes you wonder.
Really, yeah, and it's
it makes you wonder what kind of like you talked about the whole like Connor Bedard losing his mojo, which dude is one of the most modest hockey players I've ever seen in my life. If I make the roster, you know what?
Yeah. Well, he's gonna make he's making it regardless because it's Connor Bedard. But
yeah,
look at the rest. Like you said, $13 million left. Like why? You
so it makes you kind of think like, okay,
yeah.
right? Like there's that whole thing, but there's also like the whole like again, talking about what kind of push you're wanting to make, what kind of position you stand in is, okay, what kind of reputation are you going to make for yourself here in the upcoming season? Are you going to be a team that's just settling for what you have? Or are you a team that's going to go and sit and make a push? Or are you a team that's going to go and try and do something at the trade deadline, try to get more bang for your buck with all the freaking draft picks you have? It's just like their whole road to whatever they're trying to accomplish this season is just very, very confusing.
They're going to stink. They're going to stink.
That's the impression, right?
They're going to be really bad, but Connor Bedard's going to be must-watch TV. I mean, what their first 3 games of the year, it's a murderer's row. Don't they go to Boston, Pittsburgh? They go everywhere on the East, and they're going to get absolutely smoked all year long. But Connor Bedard's going to be fun to watch. I'm going to enjoy the last couple of years of Chicago being bad because pretty much my entire life they've been good. So I'm going to enjoy the fact that they're going to stink for a couple more years. But if they do,
I will say I am pretty excited. I have the pleasure of getting to see Chicago on opening night out here in Colorado. So I'm very excited about getting to watch what this team is able to do. You know, the first 20 games are kind of a wash anyway in terms of things, but being able to kind of see how they kind of mesh things and put things together, where all the puzzle pieces of this team kind of fits, will be really interesting to watch.
What I will give Davidson, though, that he did absolutely excellently with is, the team is going to stink, but that's by design. Obviously, I think he's doing that on purpose. But the fact that he went out and got Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall, he's a first overall pick. He's been in that limelight. He knows what it's like to be the guy at a point in a certain organization's time when they're not very good. The Oilers were not very good when he got drafted. So I think logistically and from a mental standpoint, honestly, that is a tremendous move by him. And plus, Connor Bedard has to have somebody to play with, right? Just like Kane had Max Domi to play with, and Domi had a pretty excellent season with Chicago. I think the two of them together are going to be, Tweedledee and Tweedledum and get all the points for the team, and they're going to have good seasons themselves. So I think that's an under the radar move by Davidson to go out and get Taylor Hall. I thought that was a really good move.
Yeah, I honestly I hinted at this earlier, but they're going to be worse than they were last year. Last year, I don't at the beginning of the season, I don't think any of us really thought Chicago was going to be that bad. It's being the Blackhawks, they weren't going to make the playoffs, but they were going to hang around in that 5 to 10 range, and they ended up being what they have 59 points last year. I looked this up because I was curious, and this is my question to you guys. The 2016-2017 Colorado Avalanche were probably the worst team in the modern day NHL, right? They had 48 points, okay?
Yeah.
Does this Blackhawk team come close to that? I honestly think they do, and I think it's interesting.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
That team was pretty bad.
Last year's team would have done it just because of how bad it was. If they didn't go on that stupid run early in the season where everyone
and at the end,
it's like people are like, okay, how come this team's getting good at the start and then they get good again at the end? Like they're almost ruining the tank. They could have done it, but this past year was the year to do it, and
they did it.
With the additions they got, I think that they're better than last year's team, but they're not moving the needle and be like, oh, we're going to make a push for a wild card. It's just
they're a 60-point team.
Yeah, they're going to hit 60, maybe 64 at the most, but we're not talking Avalanche in the 40s bad. This past season, that was the team to do it. But
I'm curious to see what their points over under is this year. I haven't seen it. I tried looking it up and I couldn't find it. I don't think they're out yet until closer to training camp. But I'm taking the under on the Avalanche. On the Blackhawks. Wherever the Blackhawks are at, I'm taking the under. I would have said the same thing about the Coyotes last year, and I think they ended up hitting the over too. But give me the under. Give me a 45-point season for the Blackhawks this year.
I would love to see that, Richie. I would love to see that.
I'm just waiting for DraftKings to put it down so we can use our codes and
little THP codes right below where you guys can use them. I like that. Nice little plug. Okay, cool. Let's keep the train rolling here. Let's talk about where Bailey's from. not the state of Colorado, but the Denver, Colorado, close enough. It's the Avalanche.
You got there.
Eventually. So Colorado finished third in the Western Conference. However, they were first in the Central Division this year. Getting knocked out, I guess it probably was an upset to the Seattle Kraken in 7 games. And they went through a bit of a phase too as well. Didn't have a first-round pick all the way until the very tail end of it, when they dealt Alex Newhook over to the Montreal Canadiens in order to acquire that first-round pick. Also losing JT Compher over to Detroit, Evan Rodriguez heading to Florida, and Eric Johnson heading to Buffalo. Adding in, I believe it was Ryan Johansson, Ross Colton, Miles Wood, Jonathan Drouin, and Andrew Cogliano. So again, a lot of those things where, yeah, you lost some key guys, but it felt like that they also gained some key guys too as well, as they try to regenerate another sort of run going into the season where it's still a very good team, where you still have Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, and all Cale Makar, the list goes on, right? Now you get a little bit more deeper down the middle with Ryan Johansson. Ross Colton is a really good bottom 6 guy. Drouin's still trying to find his game, hasn't really kind of broken yet into the NHL after the years he's kind of been through the ringer. But I'll kind of leave it to Christian here to summarize, if this team is still good enough to contend for another Stanley Cup like they were this past season, because they were the number 1 team in the Central, not by much, but they were still the number 1 team. But your thoughts and expectations this year for Colorado?
Yeah, no, I mean, Colorado last year was somehow, I don't know how this team won the Central Division last year with all the injuries they went through. They lost so many players. Gabriel Landeskog missed the entire year. He's going to miss this entire year as well. Cale Makar missed games. Nathan McKinnon missed games. There were times last year where our top line was Alex Newhook, Mikko Rantanen, and Charles Hudon. Like, there were times last year where that was the Avs top line.
One of which is no longer with us.
Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. And somehow this team was able to not only win the Central Division, no one thought they were going to, with all the injuries they had. And then you get to the playoffs and the depth scoring just dried up, and Seattle was able to roll 4 lines out, and they were able to pretty handily beat the Avs. If it wasn't for Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen in that series, that probably would have been a 5-game series. Cale Makar gets suspended for Game 5, which really sucked. I still don't think he should have been suspended. That's just me. But what they did in this offseason, they had a clear goal. They were going to try and get tougher down the middle and add some more physicality to their lineup. Miles Wood, that contract is a long one, 6 years at 2.35, I think is what his AAV is. That could be a really boom or bust. I think he's going to be a good third line guy. Ross Colton is the guy that I think is really going to be the big addition to this team. Griffin and I talked about this on an episode of the Tell Devs podcast a couple days ago. I honestly think Ross Colton is going to end up being an eventual top 6 forward for this team. I think he's really going to come into his own. The Avs last year, JT Compher was good, and the stats are going to kind of lie to you a little bit. After the trade deadline, he was a ghost. He did absolutely nothing after the trade deadline. So I think Ross Colton's going to help. I'm not sold on Ryan Johansson as a second-line center. I think he's a little too old, a little past his prime. But you basically got him for free from the Natural Predators, and they're paying half his salary. So that's a good option to have. This team is better on paper than they were last year. It's just a question of, can this team stay healthy, and can the goaltending with Alexander Georgiev, who I think surprised a lot of people last year with how good he was. He ended up playing 65 games, and he finished top 10 in Vezina voting, which I don't think anyone thought was going to be the case. And Pavel Francouz needs to stay healthy. He's probably one of the best backups in the league if he can stay healthy, but the dude can't stay healthy. So I do think this team still has a chance to win the Stanley Cup. Are they as good as the team that won it 2 years ago? Absolutely not. That was one of the greatest hockey teams we've seen in recent history, was that Colorado Avalanche team that won the Cup. They lost 4 games in the entire playoffs. Like, they just demolished everyone in their way. I think they're right up there with Dallas as the top dog in this division.
I have a great question that goes right into that.
Yeah.
So to kind of throw you in the fire here with you and Ryan.
Yeah.
If this team's healthy, I know, right? If this team is
the big if,
right? If they stay healthy, if they're fairly healthy going into the playoffs, and you guys meet Dallas in that second round playoff matchup, are you better?
I think
better than them.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, just because you have Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, and Mikko Rantanen, who are, I think, better than any player the Stars have. Like, it's just Cale Makar is better than Miro Heiskanen. I think Mikko Rantanen's up there with Jason Robertson. He had 55 goals last year, and Nathan McKinnon's one of the top 3 players in the world. So I think they're better on paper. I think Dallas is deeper than Colorado is, but the top end talent the Avs have, like, they're up there with the best in the league. So I really do think that health is really the only thing that can stop this team, and it stopped them last year. And there are rumors that Gabe Landeskog may be able to return for the playoffs, maybe, but it's going to be an interesting thing. And I think Dallas has the advantage in the net, but we saw Ottinger in the playoffs this year. He wasn't the Ottinger we saw last year against Calgary. He wasn't. So I think that Colorado is right up there with Dallas, and the top end talent. I mean, Cale Makar is better than any defenseman on planet Earth, and Nathan McKinnon's only behind Connor McDavid. So that's just where I'm at.
Well, Christian, I got a question for you. Like, so with Landy being out for the whole season, like, how does your top 6 look? Like, what do you think that you guys might be rolling with? Just
good question.
Going in for most of the season, because he's one of your big boys. So it's
he's one of the big boys.
How you compensate that?
Yeah, you're going to roll with McKinnon, Rantanen, and Lehkonen on the top line, which I think is a pretty good top line. You have Nichushkin, who's a question mark. Everything seems to be in order for him that he's going to be able to play. He was a huge factor not being in the playoff series as my dog starts barking. I think it's going to be fine. It's just going to have to figure out that second line center.
Right.
Yep.
So
I wanted to bring this up just to kind of get an idea of who they have throwing in, and just one of our guys just commented too about what, like, maybe one of the mistakes could be not bringing Evan Rodriguez back, as he had a really good year for you guys. So I mean, you look at these additions here, like Johansson's clearly going to be your number 2 center. You mentioned Ross Colton trying to get into that top 6 a little bit. Any way that maybe Jonathan Drouin can find his footing, or even Miles Wood can kind of show something to be a comparable bottom 6 guy as well.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Rodriguez, people talk a lot about how good he was. He only had 39 points. Like, he's very replaceable. And that deal he signed in Florida, the Avs could have signed him to it, but you have to remember that Florida doesn't have a state tax. So yeah, he signed for $3 million, but it probably would have been 3.5, a little bit more if the Avs were to sign him. And the Avs are going to be right up against the cap every single year from now on. Okay. So I do think Miles Wood, I'm not expecting much from him. I think he's going to be a solid third line guy. Drouin, there's rumors he could be in the top 6. I'm not a fan of that personally, just from what we've seen with Jonathan Drouin for the past 5 years in Montreal. It hasn't been great, but who knows? Maybe that connection with McKinnon from their junior days is still there. But the Avs definitely have a ton of question marks, but talent-wise, they're right up there with Dallas as the top team in this division.
Well, you mentioned Montreal and Drouin. Like, do we see that's another case of maybe it's Montreal that it's still kind of, whatever reasons, can't figure it out? Because we've seen a lot of some guys leave Montreal and kind of find their way. I mean,
I will sit here and say a perfect example of this to tie to the Avalanche is going to be Arturi Lehkonen.
Yes, I mean, it's one of those things where maybe it's Durant maybe he couldn't figure it out because maybe it's just the way Montreal's been, because everyone knows that Montreal is kind of backwards in their development, and just it seems like they're still struggling. So maybe he might find his footing in Colorado. It all really just depends. I mean, for JT, I know JT kind of like dried up for you guys, like you said in the back half. Do you think it's mainly just because of the fact of all the injuries you guys dealt with? Maybe do you think losing JT Compher might be a bigger minus than some people think, or do you think it's kind of like it is what it is?
It is what it is. I mean, JT Compher had a career year last year, but the previous 3 years before that, he had kind of been a below average third line center. Like, he had a career year this year. Where he's going to be missed most is on the penalty kill. He was our top minute getter when it came to penalty kill as a forward. So I think that's going to hurt. But the fact that he was able to get 5.1 to sign in Detroit, like, good for you, buddy. Like, that is ridiculous how much money.
Yeah, right.
You can't blame the guy.
Yeah,
I still don't know
no idea how he got that. Like, it's mind blowing to me. But
Detroit got everyone, like Shane Goss spare. I mean, they went out and just threw the bag at everyone. It's like, all right, let's speed it up for our guys.
It was crazy. He'll be missed, but also at the same time, I think he's another one of those players that he's replaceable. You can find someone, and Johansson is. Even though he's a little bit older, I think he has the potential to still get around 50 points as a second line center. So this team, like I said, they're better on paper, but the biggest question when it comes to the Colorado Avalanche is, can they stay healthy? That's the biggest question. Perfect.
I'm going to take a quick commercial break because I really got to go to the bathroom. So what we'll do, if Zach or Bailey, if you guys want to switch out for Chad to come in afterwards, that would be huge. Just because I like the way
I've got to head out anyway, so.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bailey. Thanks for filling in tonight. I really appreciate it. We'll go to commercial break. Yeah. And then we'll come back and we'll finish up the rest of the division. Okay. Thanks Bailey. See you later.
Kyle.
You know what? This is going to be a problem all year. I'm not muted. It's something wrong with my mic. All right. So you want to make a meme about it? Go ahead, because my computer's like 18 years old. So I get recycled computers from my dad, so to speak. All right. That's how sad my life is. Anyway, hey, Chad, how's it going?
What's going on, everybody? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Perfect. Well, so we're halfway through, so we're getting there slowly but surely.
I'm always late, guys. I'm sorry. I'm always showing up late.
It's all good. I figure we'll talk about a team before your team tonight because we kind of gone through everybody so far. So we'll make sure we cover some of the teams that we don't have as well. And I figured we'd start with the Minnesota Wild, the team that the Stars were able to beat out in that first round matchup. And as you can see by this lovely graphic, they acquired Patrick Maroon. And that was it. Trust me, I looked, and that's Nashville. Let's go back. There we go. But yeah, so I mean, with the acquisitions, they have Patrick Maroon, which I don't know if it makes a world of a difference, but you can really tell that all of a sudden it's starting to hurt themselves with the cap problems they now have after losing Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. In the process, they also lose Dumba. Ryan Reeves heads out to Toronto. Nyquist is gone. Klingberg also heading to Toronto. Sam Steele and Sundqvist are also out the door. So is this one of those teams, and I'll leave it to the floor for everybody, that, you know, maybe like my prediction earlier where I don't think the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to make the playoffs. We can talk about that later. But is this one of those teams in the Minnesota Wild where, like, with the only addition of Patrick Maroon, not having a highlight reel draft this year, could they fall out of the picture?
100%. Before anyone goes, can we just all agree that, like, in this group, like, we all hate Minnesota? Like,
100%.
No, that's not true.
It's a strong word.
They're not high up on my hatred list, honestly.
They are for me.
Indifferent. Indifferent.
Indifferent's a fair word for me.
We'll go with indifferent. It's like they exist because they're that boring and they're just kind of like whatever. They're just there.
Right.
Some of the fans were semi-annoying these past playoffs, and I know Stars fans can attest to that.
Man.
They were insufferable.
Gosh.
You would have thought that this team had won like 3 straight Stanley Cups or something, the way they were walking around.
That's my problem with them. These fans are so entitled, and they haven't won anything.
Right.
Just
won
because you're
nothing.
State of hockey. Yeah, if it's just because you're the state of hockey doesn't really mean it. I mean, heck, watching the Golden Gophers is more fun than watching the Wild. Like, let's be honest. Like, I'd rather watch college hockey in Minnesota than the actual Wild. Like, give me a break.
It just sucks. It sucks Kirill Kaprizov is on that team because he's awesome.
He's great.
Amazing.
I have to hate him. I have to hate him. So
and Gustafson is just the goaltender. It's just this team does nothing. Like they're boring year in and year out. They don't get any better. They don't get any, it's just all you do is go and get Pat Maroon. Oh, okay. What's he really going to do for this team? They don't do anything. I think they'll be more at the bottom of the Central than anything else, and you're not even going to worry about them by December. Heck, you're going to be worried about them by November at this point. It's just, it's a bad team.
I disagree with that just because this team just has the perpetual nature of just being a 95-point team.
Which makes no sense. It makes no sense. Like this team looks terrible, but somehow they get points.
Are they the Islanders of the Western Conference?
100%.
No,
the Islanders are better.
So.
Ish.
No. Well, okay. So I as much as I hate the Wild, I'll push back on that because there was a point during the season where they had one of the longest winning streaks during the season. So you could have argued and said, hey, guess what? They just got hot at the wrong time because at some point they could have won the Central Division. It's just they flared out at the end and ended up third. And so, I mean, if they had just waited just a couple more months, who knows? Maybe we'd be talking about the Minnesota Wild as the Stanley Cup champions just because they got hot at the right time. So,
and that's the real. No, that's right. Like that's the whole key in this too. It's when can you get hot at the right time, right? And you can make the case for the Florida Panthers, who literally just did that, who encapsulated that this season, right? So you make a very good point.
You had to bring that up, Kyle. I really appreciate it.
You think I want to talk about them? You really think I want to talk about them?
I mean,
stay tuned for tomorrow night's Pacific Division show. Anyway, just to quickly wrap up here, just to wrap up with the Wild, though, I mean, you're right. Like they add in Patrick Maroon, they don't make a lot of these additions. They lose Matt Dumba, they lose. I'll bring up the graphic real quick. Sundqvist and Steele and like a lot of these young guys who still need to kind of prove themselves a little bit. Ryan Reeves is a tough guy. I guess you can kind of switch that out with Maroon, and Klingberg as well too, who you kind of just brought in very short term. It doesn't give you a lot of hope though that this team can kind of get back to that 90-point position, right? I mean, you look at the guys that they still have on this roster. I mean, Zuccarello still had a really decent year. Kaprizov's still on this roster. I think for me the question, and I'll throw it over to you guys, is going to be goaltending a little bit. I'd like to see more of Gustafson after the Senators just gave him away to Minnesota, and wondering how much more left does Fleury have in the tank for this Wild team. That's just my 2 cents, the one on Minnesota.
Real quick, I know seemingly a lot of us don't think they're going to be able to replicate what they've done the last several seasons here, and might be a team that might miss the playoffs.
Going to finish top 3 in the Central.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a big Vegas guy in terms of the numbers. And because they're usually more often than not, they know what they're talking about. They're still the 3rd favorite in the Central right now on DraftKings. Promo code THPN. Plus 150 the Avalanche, plus 170 for the Dallas Stars. So they're neck and neck at the top. And then there's a big drop off to the Minnesota Wild, who are the 3rd favorites at plus 650. So Vegas still thinks this team is going to be a playoff team. And I don't think I necessarily disagree with it either because I don't know who else behind them is going to be able to sneak into that 3rd spot. We haven't talked about St. Louis yet. I'm not big on St. Louis this year. I already told you the Coyotes are going to be mid-pack. They ain't going to make it there. Maybe Nashville is that team to move into that 3rd spot this year, and I think that's probably the truth. I'd say if anybody sneaks into that 3rd spot and takes over Minnesota, it's going to be Nashville.
Well, so I think the 3rd place spot is completely up for grabs. And I've been saying all offseason that the gap between 1st and 2nd, which is perceived to be Colorado and Dallas, that gap is massive right now. So really it's just a free for all to see who can get 3rd place. I actually think that the Arizona Coyotes have had a really decent offseason, and I think they're going to show some really big strides coming up season. Is that enough to make the playoffs? Maybe not, but I do think they're going to be a good-looking team that can maybe push for 5th or 4th. But, the Predators are one of those weird teams we're about to talk about. Maybe they can push for 3rd when we preview them here in a little bit. We can get into that. But yeah, when it comes to the Minnesota Wild, for me, they're just very bland to me. They lack a lot of star power outside of Kaprizov, and I just don't think they have enough to I think other teams around them got much better or slightly better, and they just kind of stayed put for the most part. I don't know how they're going to be able to be anything more than their ceiling, which for me is maybe a wild card.
I think that's where I agree with Kyle more so that I see the Wild as like the Islanders of the West, where it's just like they're a very bland, boring hockey team. And I feel like Nashville could be the team that's going to get third. I mean, I know we haven't talked about Winnipeg yet, and that's a whole mess in itself. But it's just it's so weird looking at the Central Division because you see other divisions, you're like, okay, the Atlantic's going to be very interesting. The Metro is absolutely stacked. And, we're going to talk about the Pacific tomorrow, but it's just you look at the Central. Outside of the top two, like you said, Chad, like it's just a free for all, and it's like, who really knows how the rest of this division looks? It's like third place could be anyone, but if you look at who did more in the offseason, I think probably Nashville's done more than anyone else. Minnesota is just kind of flatlining and just staying stagnant. Maybe even got a little bit worse because they got really much no one coming back on their roster. And can you really depend on goaltend to save you all season and Kaprizov? That's
we're gonna find out.
I mean, that's kind of on the same page. Like, I don't know if Gustafson's gonna be able to repeat what he did last year. Like, I don't know if he's gonna be able to. He was phenomenal last year. Like, is he gonna have another season where he's like a 928? I don't know. We don't know.
Possible. Yeah.
With the worst roster, probably not. Because you look at it with all the minuses and not really any additions. I feel like you just got worse in front of him. Then you could see him getting peppered 40, 50 shots a game at some points.
That's still the biggest mistake they did was why they put Marc-Andre Fleury in for game 2 against the Stars.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
That was one of the dumbest things that Dean Evason's ever done. And
it cost him. It cost him
the series. Yeah. Cost him the series.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, perfect. Let's move on. Chad, let's do it. Ready?
I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
Okay, let's go. So bringing in Nashville now, you guys mentioned real quick earlier that they were very active this offseason. Bringing in Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Schenn from Toronto, just bringing in Nyquist, as we just saw, losing. He left Minnesota. Adding, I believe it's Cody Glass, if I'm not mistaken, I think. And then Dennis Gurianov too as well, as he shipped out of Montreal and found himself in Nashville. And then the guys that we mentioned earlier, Duchesne, Johansson, all of a sudden out the door. Cal Foote was recently the one that was just let go too. A team that was fighting to the bitter end. I mean, man, they took out my team at the end of the season, right? And they were right in the mix until the end of it with the Jets to try to sneak into the playoffs. And we did just speak about the fact that maybe Minnesota is one of those teams that does find their way out, and Nashville sneaks in all of a sudden. So my question to you, Chad, is with the additions that they made, losing Duchesne, losing Johansson, two guys who were making $8 million, is that going to be enough to get you guys to that third place position that we were talking about earlier?
It could be. I will say Cody Glass was actually not an addition this past offseason. He was acquired in a trade a couple of seasons ago.
Saw that in the transactions. I just threw that in there, so thank you.
No, it's all good. It's all good. He did get re-signed as a RFA this offseason, though.
Got it. Makes sense.
Which was a big deal because he is the future of hopefully the future of one of our top 6 centers here coming up. But and the heir apparent, hopefully, to Ryan Johansson, who just never worked out here as a elite top line center that this franchise wanted him to be. But as far as pushing for third, I think it's very realistic for the reasons we've just talked about when we were talking about the Minnesota Wild and how it is kind of a free for all and how the division is somewhat top heavy, very top heavy. Here's the weird thing about what the Predators have gone through, and we don't even have to go back to free agency. We have to go back to just the March trade deadline. This roster has been just completely flipped over for the most part, aside from the younger players who are coming up that are going to be a big part of this team as well in the upcoming season. But you go back to the trade deadline, you lose Matthias Ekholm, a fan favorite. You move on from Mikael Granlund, which was a great subtraction for this organization. Tanner Jeannot shockingly gets traded, who was another fan favorite, and you get a boatload of draft picks from Tampa out of it. Just, so much has happened. So this Nashville Predators team, they're going to stumble out of the gate. I truly feel that way because you've got a new head coach in Andrew Brunette, who is going to be vastly different than the very boring and make you want to pull your hair out style of John Hines. So it's going to take some growing pains. It's going to take some time to build some chemistry with Ryan O'Reilly joining the mix, with Nyquist. Gustav Nyquist joins the team, probably in the top 6 as a winger. And then you've got Philip Forsberg coming back from a really bad head injury. He's been out of action since February. So there's a lot of variables that are really unknown. So I think this team could stumble badly, and they're going to get hot in the second half of the season. I could see that definitely taking shape. And, of course, you got UC Saros, a Vesna caliber goalie. So you've always got a chance, obviously.
How do you feel with – I'm sorry to cut, but how do you feel – like you got a new head coach. How do you feel about the new front office, too? Because you're talking new GM, new style of everything. And then you said just Saros, like – figuring out what to do with the backup, like what are your thoughts on just like all these changes coming in with just head coach, front office, and just trying to figure out pieces as you guys are going along this season?
So I would say the fan base that I interact with daily is very split on this. Half of the fan base is wanted the whole thing to be ripped apart, and they were completely prepared to be a bottom dweller for a while. And they weren't crazy about going out and spending money on Ryan O'Reilly. And they weren't crazy about going out and getting Nyquist and getting Luke Shin to clog up the defense a little bit more, because these are all 30-plus-year-old players past their primes, most likely. So there's that segment of the fan base that's a little upset. There's another segment that is rejuvenated because John Hines is gone. David Poyle, who is, of course, deserves all the credit in the world for being one of the greatest general managers the league has ever had, but he never won a Stanley Cup, and he got this franchise to only one conference final. And you had a lot of great regular season teams, and he didn't get it done in the playoffs. So he's gone. You get Barry Trotz, he's the first head coach of this franchise. Andrew Burnett scored the first goal for this franchise as a player. So you've got this renewed energy but we don't know what to make of that, because this team is still very short of being a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. We got to wait for these younger crop of players like Cody Glass, Thomas Novak, these types of player, Luke Evangelista, who came in. We also got to remember this team went through a ton of injuries all within the last couple months of the season, surrounded by the trade deadline sell-off. So you were basically playing with an AHL roster while this team was trying to somehow chase down the Winnipeg Jets. Like, it was just, I don't even know how this team stayed afloat and finished 3 points shy of a playoff spot this last year, fielding an AHL roster for the most part. It was crazy. So now we got to see if these young guys can avoid what I would call a sophomore slump, because they're going to be back this year, and Luke Evangelista, Cody Glass, those types of players. And you got to see how Ryan O'Reilly, you got to see, I mean, that's a big question mark. And I want your opinions on this, because Toronto wanted to keep him. I don't think Toronto wanted to lose Ryan O'Reilly in the grind that he brings. But, I read an article on, I think it was TSN or one of those, that he just didn't like the feel of being in Toronto. Yep. And maybe he didn't like the pressure. He goes to a much smaller market in Nashville. What do you guys think of that?
I was surprised. I was surprised he went to Nashville. I thought he'd go to maybe go back to St. Louis. I did not expect him to go to Nashville, just because I think everyone, once you saw what Nashville was doing with Duchesne and Johansson, they were going towards a rebuild, and really they just went and exchanged those older players for older players. Like, that's really what they did, and they took a big cap hit for it. So I think Nashville, I really liked what they were doing in the second half of the season, like you were saying, Chad, with that AHL lineup. Those young kids were playing well, and they almost got you guys to the playoffs. It's just, I don't know what they're going to do. I was surprised by the O'Reilly sign. I was surprised by the Luke Shen signing, but also you got to remember Barry Trotz is in there, and Barry Trotz loves a team that's 35 plus. Like, that's what he loved to coach, was 35-plus-year-old players. So I'm interested to see what they do, but I was shocked when they got O'Reilly. I was.
To give you guys more information real quick before we move on, just about Ryan O'Reilly, his tenure with Toronto, in his 13 games in the regular season that he was there for, he had 4 goals, 7 assists, totaled 11 points. He did not register after game 1 against Florida. He did not register a goal or an assist for the rest of the series. Meanwhile, in the playoffs for Toronto, he had, from what I'm reading here, he had 3 goals and 6 assists in those 6 games against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So a guy who can still pot it, who can still create chances, who can still generate points. I don't think that's where my concern really is going to lie. I think a lot of people, you're right. Like, we are surprised that I think he did show up there. I'm personally not surprised that he left Toronto for exactly the reasons why he said, because nobody wants to play in that type of market, because you guys are lucky you're not in Toronto, because I hate everything about it. It sucks. It's the worst. All right? It's awful. The traffic sucks. The people are sketchy, and there's nothing to do down there. Okay?
Hang on.
Tell us how you really feel, Kyle.
Yeah. I will. I will. Tell me about it. Don't get me started. But yeah, so yeah, go ahead.
Can I say one more thing about the Ryan O'Reilly thing as well? I think that Barry Trotz's vision, and I'm kind of it didn't make sense to me either on free agency. I was not expecting it, and it was like within the first 5 minutes the free agency opened, it was made news that ROR was going to Nashville, and I thought I got I first saw it from Elliot Friedman, and I thought it was one of those burner accounts or whatever you call it, fake accounts. And I broke my own golden rule, and I retweeted it before I made sure it wasn't a fake account. And then I was sweating bullets, like, oh my gosh, I just retweeted a fake Elliot Friedman. I was like sweating bullets, and then I found out it was the real Elliot Friedman. I was like, oh my gosh. All right, I'm good. Anyway,
oh my gosh,
that's how much I didn't expect that. But here's what I think. I think that Barry Trotz sees this as more of, he wanted mentors on this team to really bring up these younger players like Cody Glass. And honestly, this team didn't have a top line center, and I don't know if Cody Glass is ready for top line center minutes. And I think ROR can definitely provide leadership for this youth, and I think he's ready for that. He's kind of alluded to that in some of his interviews he's done with the Nashville media, that he's excited to be a mentor and be a leader for this younger team that's got some exciting prospects and forwards that are coming up that played down the stretch this past season and played very well. So I think I see it from that. I don't get the Gustav Nyquist edition at all. I didn't like that one. Maybe I'll eat my words on it, but I don't like him taking a top 6 spot from one of our younger talented players. And Luke Shin threw me off as well. I mean, I know he's a championship caliber player and he's played for great teams, but that one, I don't know if I'll ever make sense of. I will say, and Ryan, I know you're going to know this player. Maybe you can give me some thoughts on this. Denis Garyanov, we signed him for cheap. What do you think about him?
He never really lived up to the hype of him being a first-round pick in Dallas. And he had the one good season where he had exactly 20 goals. He led the Stars with 20 goals. That's insane to think that. And then he had the bubble run, which was insane. And he was one of the best players for the Stars in the bubble run. He had 4 goals in one game against Calgary at one point. 4 goals. Ridiculous, insane.
Don't remind me.
But sorry, Kyle. But I just don't. I don't see it from him, and I have no ill will against him at all. He had all the talent in the. Okay, Joe Mama already.
He just said it.
He just said it. He had all the talent in the world, but he just doesn't have any finish. Maybe he needs to be finished instead of Russian. I don't know to get it to work, but it just. He can never finish, and maybe he can do that in Nashville playing with Ryan O'Reilly or someone like that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't know where Garyanov is going to fit. I think he's going to have to prove himself in training camp because there's a lot of competition in our forwards. But that one kind of surprised me as well. So yeah, I think it's anybody's guess what the Preds do this year. They're a very hard team to figure out, but
for sure
their ceiling could be 3rd. Their floor could be 7th. I mean, seriously, I think it's that big of an unknown with the Predators.
Chad, I have one more question for you real quick. Do you think there's any possibility that they end up trading UC Saros this year?
Whoa.
No.
I don't think so. Well, I can't ever speak in absolutes like this because it's always possible, but I would put the probability very low because
that Askarov kid would have to be good, man.
No, he is, but Askarov's hitting a little bit. He's hitting some speed bumps. I think Askarov's really got to have a second big year in Milwaukee in the AHL for me to feel super confident. But we're running out of time on Saros. He's got 2 years left, and then he's going to get paid fat. So
that's the only reason why I'm thinking they could potentially move up, because the return you could get for UC Saros is.
You're not wrong.
I think it's more than what Hellebuck would get.
Correct.
I think the return for Saros is more than Hellebuck.
I don't think you're going to get a lot for a goaltender though. We've seen that.
You'd be surprised.
I just don't. I don't see it. I don't see it.
Dude, if the Devils wanted Saros, can you imagine the package they could send to the Predators if the Devils got Saros?
It's very true.
Well, then the Predators would just hold on to him. Honestly,
there's always teams that are going to go out and do whatever they need to get goaltending, because really good goaltending doesn't grow on trees, and teams will give up the bank to get guys like that. So like I said,
sure the Oilers.
The Oilers.
Yeah. I mean,
McDavid going the other way.
Christian, I love that you brought up
tomorrow.
I love that you brought up that question though about Saros, because the Predators have 6 UFAs in their forwards coming up in the next offseason. So that's going to be interesting. They got 2 RFAs. Saros is going to be a UFA in 2 off seasons. You're obviously not going to hold on to Saros and Askarov at the same time. One of them's got to go. I think there's higher probability that they unload Askarov and they back up the Bricks truck for Saros and keep him as a franchise goaltender, similar to the same way they treated Pecorine. I actually think that's more likely but Askarov has got to have a good year. He kind of had a middle average year by his standards. So I think there's a lot that has to happen in this upcoming season, but you're not wrong in bringing up that point. It's definitely, it could happen.
I'm going to intervene just because we'll move on to St. Louis right after I just make these 2 quick points, because actually Joe Mama made a very good point as well too, that the Golden Knights did just win the Stanley Cup with Aiden Hill in net. Laurent Brossoit was in there too. They had Jonathan Quick. They had 5 goalies that they kind of worked with this entire season. The point that I'm trying to make with this, just to kind of wrap this conversation up, is that I don't think this is a league anymore where it's a 1 goaltender league. You're not going to go into a playoffs where you can rely on 1 goaltender. If you're looking at the Rangers just as an example with Igor Shesterkin, you're going to want a reliable, confident backup just in case something's not right. If he's injured that nobody says anything about, right? I know it kind of happened with the Devils this year a little bit, but this is not a 1 goaltender league anymore. So in terms of trying to trade Saros, you might want to revisit that if you can't get an extension, depending on what the money looks like next year. And maybe you do get a good package, but understand that, especially in a long season in an 82-game year, you're going to need some goaltenders, right? You're going to need at least a carousel of them, so to speak. So
speak on that, Kyle, real quick. Like instead of getting rid of Askarov, you bring him in and you let Saros kind of train him up, because you look at what Carolina's doing. You've got Peter Kochetkov down there as their goaltender behind Anderson and Ranta, and like what Kyle said, there's a lot of teams that are going with 2-3 10 goalies. So I mean, if you look at Askarov, don't get rid of him. Bring him in as the backup, let Saros take care of him, and then you have your goalie of the future already there as your backup, learning from one of your guys. So
okay, all right. So. Let's keep the train rolling. Let's keep it going. I know I've said it all night, but let's keep going. Let's talk about the Blues. So they were kind of funny in the sense that they were just there in the middle of the conference pack and didn't really do a whole lot this season. Obviously they make the big addition. They were probably one of the earlier additions when the offseason began, acquiring Kevin Hayes. They bring in Sundqvist and McCurchin as well, losing Todd, Santini, Pitlick, and Logan Brown in the process. But I think what they're attempting to do is, again, still trying to stay relevant, and what we've talked about in a division that is still up in the air for a 3rd place spot, maybe one of the 2 wild card spots. So I don't know if, in my eyes personally, that Kevin Hayes is going to, be a world of a difference maker for this Blues team. But I want to leave this question to the floor here and ask, what needs to go right, or what certain area needs to go right for this Blues team in order to be successful this season? Does it have to be with Jordan Binnington getting back to his form in 2019? Does it have to be with Torrey Krug and Justin Falk maybe taking another step and just trying to pull this team together? Or is Jordan Kyrou maybe this next guy going forward that he can kind of play with along with guys like Kevin Hayes and company?
For me, it's Jordan Binnington. He's the anchor of that team right now. He signed a 6x6, and he has not lived up to that expectation. He's riding the coattail of 1 playoff run. And Blues fans will tell you the Nazem Kadri thing, they would have beat us if it wasn't for Nazem Kadri taking his knee. But Nazem Kadri didn't take his knee out. Calle Rolls did that. So thank you, Connor. I appreciate that there. I really do think that Jordan Binnington's the key. You talked about Jordan Kyrou. I think Robert Thomas, those guys both signed huge contract extensions, and they're going to have to live up to those expectations with those contracts. And what their GM has done to the defense core by re-signing Parayko, Falk, and Torrey Krug and letting Pietrangelo leave, they're screwed because Parayko is not good anymore. He's one of the worst defensemen in the league, and he's making like $7 million a year. So it really depends on Jordan Binnington. I think we're all kind of in agreement that they're going to be one of the bottom teams in the Central this year.
I just wanted to bring up the graphic too, just before you guys move on. Just the banner below this nice little banner here. Just when it comes by, look at the point difference between St. Louis and Nashville, and even Winnipeg too. Like you compare Winnipeg and St. Louis here, that's a 14-point difference right there. So I'm curious if they're going to able to close the gap at all in that regard.
No. Like what Christian said, like the defense is not really that good. You look at Binnington. I mean, we talk about getting hot at the right time. That's essentially what Binnington was. He got hot at the right time. Everyone thought he was the guy. And you can see that. You rattle him, he's swinging his sticks at guys. He's throwing water bottles at people. It's just the dude's a hothead. He wants to fight all the backup goalies. It's like if Binnington – it all comes down to Binnington, but it's just like where's the defense at? And I would say like getting Mac – for this season, speaking from a guy because we had him in Carolina last year, and when he came in, he put points on the board for the playoffs when the Hurricanes needed him. But I mean, he's not really necessarily moving the needle either. Binnington's getting in a goalie fight. Let's be honest; it's going to happen at some point. It's as long as the
over 4. Which just real quick, like your guys' thoughts if Binnington's going to fight maybe more than 3 times this year.
I hope so.
He's going to be getting scored. He's going to be getting scored on a lot. So I think you need to take a high number on that because the Blues are going to be giving up a lot of goals.
Yeah, 100%. So as long as the refs let them too. It's just the Blues. They're going to be at the bottom. They're not going to add anything to it. They're not going to close the gap. It's just gonna be a tough year for them.
They're like stuck in that like kind of purgatory. Exactly.
Purgatory,
they don't really know. Yeah. They're like in between whether they want to try to go for a Stanley Cup again or they just want to go for a complete retool. And I think they were moving in that direction when they traded Ryan O'Reilly, who was their captain, right? You trade your captain, that's a signal to me that we're gonna throw in the towel, not just for this season, but we're gonna try and get younger, et cetera, and they missed the playoffs, so they got the draft pick. But I said it earlier, I think you guys all agree, Coyotes are going to be better than the St. Louis Blues this year.
100%.
I was actually shocked when you brought up the points there, that gap was only 11 points, which is wild. That's only 6 games, right? That's insane to me. When you go back to the beginning of last year and how bad everyone thought the Coyotes were going to be, if you would have told me before the season that the Coyotes would be only 11 points back of the St. Louis Blues, I'd have been like, oh, hell yeah, I'll take that. So they're going to swap this year. That's where and we have a Coyotes fan in the chat. I don't know if he's still with us here, Adam. Yeah. But kind of going real quick back to what I said earlier, I think that's where the Coyotes are at. They're in that 80-point margin, somewhere around there. And so I have a feeling Blues are going to move back down to the bottom 5 of the entire league in that 70, 75 point range. And the Coyotes are going to move to 80 and they're going to continue to build.
I like it, Richie. We're on the same page there.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. I could see the Coyotes passing the Blues and no one's going to be upset about it.
No,
so.
I agree. Okay. All right. Very good. Let's wrap this up, shall we? Let's get to our final team of the night. Let's talk about the only Canadian team in this division in the Winnipeg Jets. So the biggest news really with them this offseason, we're kind of in the same boat as Calgary a little bit where certain guys just left. I mean, I don't know if they want to play for Winnipeg, but that's not the point. You're hearing rumblings of Scheifele wanting to leave, Hellebuck wanting out too. Pierre-Luc Dubois got his wish. He's out the door. He heads to LA. And the following comes back in a package in return with Alex Iafallo, Gabriel Velarde, and Rasmus Kupari as well. They also bring in Laurent Brossoit as well, too. Curious to see how that's going to work, especially with Hellebuck in net for the time being until he gets traded. We don't know how. DeLay as well, too, is going to be there, too, probably for the farm team. Again, they lose Dubois, losing Blake Wheeler, one of the guys that they've had for many, many years, him heading to New York. Stenlund, and also to losing David Reddick as well. So I think maybe 2 questions to ask the group here about the Jets is really just about Pierre-Luc Dubois, because in my eyes, I think a lot of people might agree with me here, is that I think the Jets clearly won this deal. They got a great package back from Pierre-Luc Dubois, and him signing that 8x8, I think it was, with the LA Kings might be one of the worst decisions that they've made since winning the Stanley Cup. Because I don't see this guy, if you haven't seen his highlights, and when he was under Tortorella in Columbus, and then when him wanting to go to Montreal and all that shit.
Last shift, man.
The last shift. Right.
That was brutal.
I haven't seen, in my eyes, the point production, what he's been able to do on the ice to convince me that he's worth $8 million. So I don't like the deal.
He acts like Connor McDavid, and he's not.
Right. So I don't like it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. 8x8.5. So you were close.
8. Well, even more stupid. Even more stupid. So I think in the Jets' perspective, though, I think it's a really great return. And now that we're kind of at the point in the year where Scheifele and Hellebuck haven't been dealt, I'm one to imagine that they're probably going to at least play each other out until they get dealt before the trade deadline, or they just finish the year and then move on to a different team, or maybe they stay. I don't know. But if you're just looking at this team today with what they have in Hellebuck, Scheifele, with the additions that they made from Pierre-Luc Dubois, this is a team that, in my eyes, I think can still fight for that third spot. I think they're a little bit more creative now with those additions that they made from the Kings. You bring in a reliable goaltender who was for the Golden Knights this year, and Laurent Brossoit for those playoff games that we saw early on. But just to give it out to the group, your initial thoughts on the early Jets trade with Pierre-Luc Dubois, the package that they got back, and what you guys expect from your rival Winnipeg Jets going into this season.
I don't expect very much, to be honest, from the Winnipeg Jets. They're literally the definition of meh, right? Like they're not going to be in the bottom of the league, right? Okay, but they're also not contending. I don't think they're top 3 in the division. I think it's going to be Nashville, and I'm in agreement with you on a lot of y'all on that. I think they're the perfect wild card team. I really think that's what it is at this point. And I think just from a Stars fan perspective, as brutal as watching Rick Bowness hockey is, and Joe Mama down there is talking about it, it's effective. I mean, it is 100% effective. And when you've got a goaltender like Hellebuck who can stop the puck, and I mean, I still think he's just as good as he's ever been. I think he's underrated at this point. People are like, "Oh, it's Hellebuck. He's not as good as he used to be." I disagree with that, but I think they could get into a wild card position and maybe cause some heads to turn and cause some teams to freak out a little bit. But ultimately, I think they're just the definition of meh.
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, the Jets definitely won the deal getting rid of PLD and bringing Velarde and Iafallo. I mean, if you look at those two guys, they did pretty well in LA, and then those are two guys that you get rid of PLD, but you bring in two really good guys that maybe get you to that next step, whatever the next core is. For me, it's just like, from what you hear, in effect, of all the guys that want to leave and just how they basically just rolled over and played dead in the playoffs, it makes you wonder, how's the locker room and how's the toxicity and everything that happened last year. I think it's going to be a carryover effect, and I think we're going to see a Jets team that's just going to kind of just be there. But then it's like with their head coach, their head coach comes out and says all that to the press. The main leadership guys don't really like that. I feel like it's going to be a very awkward season, and it's just going to be, you're going to see the Jets play like they did. Like, I think they're going to be in the middle of the pack, like you said, Ryan, but it's going to be just brutal to watch with just everything that's going on.
And I don't think that Rick Bowness was brought in to make this team be a playoff team. I really truly think this. When Barry Trotz decided that he wasn't going to take the job there, and he was going to take a year off and pay attention with family, I think they brought Rick Bowness in because of that toxicity. I really truly believe that he is one of the most beloved coaches in the NHL and has been for a very long time. You cannot say it. I disagree with the guy about how he plays hockey is very much the modern day version of trap hockey. but he is one of the most like down to earth, humble guys, and he is beloved by players. He was adored by the players here in Dallas. And when he came out and said those things about the Winnipeg Jets, and he was all pissed off and saying the things that he did, and they had no pushback, right? That really surprised me. And that right there showed me right there that he is really trying to change. That's why he was brought in. It wasn't necessarily to make this team the best team in the world or anything like that, but it is to change the fundamental organization of this toxicity around this team. So I think so. Sorry.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. It's just a lot for him. He has to deal with a lot. So I agree with you.
He has
completely.
A lot on his plate.
Yeah, like Rick's a great guy. I'm completely agreeing with you on that. It's just everything else around it. It's just going to be. I feel like it's going to be a lot of pushback on both sides. It seems like more. They might have more pushback on that than they did on the ice.
Did y'all see that story from, I think it was earlier this offseason, where the ownership group had to put out a statement to their fans? Yeah. Basically, it was a threat, more or less. It was basically like, listen, guys, buy season tickets or else we're going to move again. And as a Coyotes fan, a lot of Coyotes fans are like, we don't really like Winnipeg. I don't really care. They have nothing. Only thing I have against the Winnipeg Jets is they try to act like they're the original Winnipeg Jets. They're not. They're the Atlanta Thrashers. Okay, that's who that team is. They're not the Winnipeg Jets. These are the Winnipeg Jets. So I think that shows.
That was good. That was good. I like that one. That was good.
So that just goes to show you that like their fan base doesn't even freaking care anymore. Like I don't know what their season ticket sales are like or what their ticket sales are like, but like they've turned apathetic there, man. They turned apathetic really, really quick. And I don't know we've seen some comments here. That team's going to go as far as Connor Hellebuyck takes them, basically.
That's what I was about to say.
And he's good enough by himself to basically get that team to win more games than not, 2-1, 3-2, those close games, right? And that's good enough to get you to 85, 90 points and make the playoffs as like your 8 seed, basically, and just sneak in. And then who knows, maybe he goes full Florida Panthers and Sergei Bobrovsky and he becomes unstoppable in the playoffs and they manage to make a run like we were alluding to earlier. So yeah, the Winnipeg Jets are they're just like there, man. They're like, we'll see.
They're another team that's stuck in purgatory. Like the thing is if Hellebuyck gets dealt, this team could finish bottom of this division. They could, but we don't know what's going on with Hellebuyck, and that defense stinks. I mean, Nate Schmidt's on there. You have Pionk. You have Morrissey was good last year. He started the year strong, and then he kind of faded off near the end. He got hurt before the playoffs. If Hellebuyck stays the whole year, I think they can be a wild card team. If he gets traded, this team's going to finish in the bottom of the division.
Okay, I agree. I think that does hinge on a lot of it, though. Any last thoughts, real quick, on the Jets, guys, or are we good?
I mean, can they give Connor Hellebuyck any type of goal production? Can they improve on that in any way? Yeah. Then they can suddenly become a third place team. But do we see them being a top 10 offense or top 10 power play? I don't see it on paper. So especially with the style of hockey they're probably going to be playing. So yeah, probably fringe wild card team.
I want to see a J Fresh card on Connor Hellebuyck's WAR percentage just because of the fact of like what Richie said. He carries that dang team. It's like I'm surprised his back isn't hurting from having to do all the heavy lifting. I want to see that WAR percentage from J Fresh.
You know, guys, I mean, I understand that feeling of feeling like you're irrelevant to everyone else around the league, because that's what the Predators have gone through the past few years with John Hines. Same thing can be said about UC Saros, that the Predators only win games when Saros stands on his head. And that's why there is a rejuvenation to tie it with the Predators, because they did go out and do something this offseason. They did move on from their GM that they've only had for their entire franchise history. They did go out and get a bold hire with Andrew Burnett, who is going to hopefully fix the offense. But the Jets, they're just kind of like floating around, dangling Connor Hellebuyck out there, hoping that he somehow
come get him.
He gets them another because these fans, they get, of all fan bases, these fans don't like it when their team just does enough to make the playoffs and then they just get thrown out in the first round. Fans don't like that. Show a vision for your franchise for the long-term future, or put a Stanley Cup caliber team on the ice. It's one or the other for fans.
It's just try. Just try. That's all we care about. It's just
try.
Just try. Act like you care.
Participation medal. Yeah. Good. All right, cool. So I'll wrap up the show, just kind of what I did with the other two. I just have a list just of my predictions for this division. You guys can hate me and love me for it. I really don't give a shit. But this is my little take on it. So, Ryan, I got your Stars in number 1 this year. I think it is a well-rounded team. I am a little concerned with Christian's Avalanche in the sense that the injuries might be, like with Gabriel Landeskog, I think it's going to be a bit of a concern. Not that much of a setback. I still got them at number 2. I think they're still going to be in a good spot in this division. And we've talked about it all night. You convinced me more and more that I think Nashville does end up in this 3rd spot. You're right. It does end up for the taking. Originally, I kind of came into this thinking that the Jets could be that 3 seed. I got them falling to 4th now. I think they do still find a way to get in. If this team stays intact, I like them 4th. I like Arizona 5th. I don't think that's too crazy to say. I like them better than St. Louis. I think they're trending at least in a better direction than I think whatever the hell St. Louis has going. And then Chicago, I think it's going to be tough sledding trying to see what they're going to get out of production for Connor Bedard and the guys that they have around them. I think it's going to be tough sledding in that regard. So, quick thoughts on your my little playoff predictions there.
I think you nailed it. I do think Dallas is going to win the division this year just because I just don't trust the Avs to stay healthy. I just don't.
Right.
Like the Avs on paper look like they're going to be awesome, but I think Dallas is a more well-rounded team. So I think you got Dallas at 1 and then Colorado at 2 and then a pretty steep drop off after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just quickly would bring up, I just wanted to bring up what Connor was saying about how you compare Hellbuck. Like he's basically carrying this friggin' team on its back. But yeah, any last thoughts before we sign off tonight, guys?
No, you're how you predict it. I don't see anything wrong with that.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much spot on in my opinion. Like just looking at what we all talked about tonight. So
cool. Well, just like my beer show. Yeah,
real quick, can I ask before we really sign off? I'm generally curious as we on August 24th before the seasons get started. Stanley Cup picks.
Okay.
Who you got?
Ryan, you go first.
Oh, that's not fair. Well, what am I supposed to say?
Sure. Tell me how you really feel. Go on, just say it.
Fine. I think Dallas is going to win the cup this year.
Okay.
What a homer! What a homer!
Oh yeah,
you idiot!
But like, here's my thing. Here's my thing, and why I believe that they have a really good shot of winning the Stanley Cup, and why I think they will do it. One of my biggest things that I talk about is the fact that you have to lose first before you can win. And they've had the heartbreak in 2020, and they were 2 games away. They're going to have a really sour taste in their mouth, especially Jamie Benn after that stupid mistake that he made in the playoffs against Vegas. And I know it seemed like the Vegas was up 3-0, but 2 of those games went to overtime, and one of those games we should have won. We were the better team. And the other game we could have stolen because it went to overtime. So it could have very easily gone the other way. It didn't. There's going to be a sour taste in their mouth. They learned how to lose. This is it. This is real. This is what I really feel like. This is the year for the Stars to go all the way in.
Chad, your prediction.
I am also a big believer in the Dallas Stars. I missed the segment where you guys were previewing the Dallas Stars, but I'm a big believer in them. I think you're spot on when you say how well-rounded they are. I think Jake Ottinger is going to take a big step forward as well this year. Just like everything about the team, but I got them losing to the New Jersey Devils.
What? Whoa.
That's really funny you say that, Chad, because that would be my second pick, honestly.
New Jersey Devils taking out the Stars in what should be a outstanding Stanley Cup final. That would be appointment must watch. Would be great for the NHL. You'd have 2 teams with a lot of star power. No pun intended.
Nice.
But yeah, I would like that. I would like that matchup. I really would personally. So that's what I'm going to go with.
Straight 2000 matchup.
I love it. Zach, I'm sure you like that pick.
Yeah, it's such a great. I mean, I do have the Stars coming out of the West, but it's
okay.
But it's the Canes gonna beat the Stars, and you're not taking Brett Pesce either. So sorry to.
All right.
Sorry, Ryan.
Christian, you're.
I said someone like Brett Pesce. I don't think we're actually gonna get him. We need someone like.
Yes.
I mean,
Christian. Sorry, go ahead, Christian. Your picks. Yes.
I'm gonna go. I mean, I have to take the Avs. I think the Avs come out of the West. I think they get healthy at the right time, and Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon make that big leap. I think they beat Edmonton in the Western Conference Final again, and I think that'd be really funny. And then I got them going up against the Carolina Hurricanes. I think the Hurricanes are due to make it to a Cup final, but I just don't trust their goaltending in a Cup final. So I'll take the Avs over the Canes.
Hey, Christian, I'll be seeing your boys this February here in Carolina. So
all right,
that's gonna be a fun one. So.
There we go. I like it.
Richie, I'll give mine last, but you asked the question, so go ahead.
So I'm going to give you DraftKings odds again, just because I always love going to that.
I like it. I love it.
And I'm not taking the favorite. I'll spoil my pick. So Canes are your favorite plus 800. Leafs and Devils plus 900. Avalanche plus 1,000. Oilers plus 1,000. And then Golden Knights plus 1,200 to repeat. So I am going to go with who I picked to win the Stanley Cup final at the beginning of the playoffs last year, and they blew it on me. They absolutely blew it. I know I made fun of them earlier in the show, but I'm taking the Edmonton Oilers this year.
I knew that was
gotta be awesome. I just want Connor McDavid to win a Stanley Cup, damn it. I know he's boring as all hell. But
it would be good for the sport.
Just win that. Just like have your best player we've seen since Mario freaking Lemieux win a Stanley Cup, for goodness sakes. Please. It's like if LeBron James never won NBA championship, right? Or Patrick Mahomes never won a Super Bowl. We just need to see it. And he's sick and tired of it, man. He's in his prime. He's 26 years old. Stuart Skinner had a good season last year. He was a Calder finalist. He's only going to get better, I think, as he continues to play in the NHL. So give me the Oilers at 10-1, man.
Richie, you haven't interacted with Edmonton fans on Twitter enough. They are the absolute worst. They are.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
How do you think I feel?
They are.
Can we all agree though? Can we all agree though that the Leafs being like second best odds is an absolute joke because they've won one series and
DraftKings is just trying to take your money. They're just trying to take your money by doing that. So that's a free.
I mean, that's how most of their profitability is probably from Leafs fans going, yes, they're gonna win. You win one series in forever. Like, calm down. At least make it to the second round first before you start getting second best odds.
They are quite literally the Cowboys of the NHL. Yeah. We're gonna win the Super Bowl.
And the Yankees of baseball. So so you got your Toronto Yankees Cowboys fan in Alabama, you're set.
There you go. Yeah.
I love it. I agree with Richie, actually. I think the Oilers are destined in the sense that you're right. Like, at some point, you need your star players to show up and win it. And, they've been knocking on the door. Obviously, we saw what happened this year. They just ran into Vegas, who, in my opinion, were just more of a complete team than what the Oilers were. And, I still think they have to make a little bit more moves, maybe at the deadline. I think that's what they're going to end up doing in order to kind of make that push. I don't. In my eyes, in the West this year, we'll talk about it more tomorrow night about Edmonton, but I just don't see anyone stopping this team. I really, really don't, especially if they make some acquisitions at the deadline. I thought that nobody was going to stop them this year, and if it weren't for Vegas, there was no way. I'm sorry, Ryan, that I didn't think Dallas was going to be that good enough to try to beat Edmonton in that Western final there. I had Edmonton-Boston in the final this year, but fuck what I know. I mean, like, they both got knocked out early. So
we all look stupid with the Boston.
We all do. We all look dumb anyway. So I've got Edmonton winning it all this year. Coming out of the East, it's a big toss-up. I don't know. I mean, you can make a really good argument for Carolina. You can make a great argument for the Devils. You can make an argument for the Toronto Maple Leafs too, but I'm telling you, I think it's going to be another surprise team coming out of the East. I don't actually have a team, to be honest with you. I think those three teams that I mentioned there, maybe my hot take is that none of them are going to be in the Cup final this year.
So you're saying the Panthers are going to do it again?
Sure, why not?
Gosh, no.
That'd be awesome. Please no. I think that's just
so hold on. So did the Tampa Bay Lightning just drop off the face of the earth? I know they're not as good as the dynasty Tampa Bay Lightning, but they didn't drop off the face of the earth. They still are.
I mentioned that
they still have some decent players.
This is my hot take. I think Tampa Bay is going to be even better this year than they were last year.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
I agree.
I think Tampa's going to be rock solid, man.
Hey,
Kyle doesn't agree with you, Christian. He doesn't.
I know he doesn't. But Tampa, think about it. They went to 3 straight Cup finals. This is the longest offseason any of those old guys have had in so long. I think Tampa is going to make some noise in the East. I agree. Andre Vasilevsky is the best goalie on planet Earth, man. Like I can see a world where Tampa gets in the playoffs again and they're actually a little bit more well rested. I could see a world where they make it back to the Cup final.
So
I
Kyle,
have the Tampa Bay Lightning finished 6th in the Atlantic this year.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. I think it's going to be not that I don't disagree. I'm not disagreeing that Vasilevsky is the best one, has been one of the best goaltenders for the longest time. Here's my problem. Stamkos, Kucherov, Vasilevsky are going to have to carry this team again. Not a lot of the additions that they made in this, in the past, in this offseason, you add in Luke Glendening. I think the losses of Ross Colton and Alex Killorn are going to hurt this team a little bit. And not to say that Tampa Bay is going to be a bad team. I just think that in that Atlantic division specifically, it's going to be very competitive with guys like Ottawa coming up.
No love for Braden Point.
Okay, Braden Point, sure.
Let's just say this. You take the Tampa Bay Lightning and you throw them into the Central, they make the playoffs easy.
100%.
I think they have a chance to win the Central.
Yeah. I really believe that they're going to miss the playoffs this year. I really do.
Yeah, because you look at the Atlantic.
That's my only hot take.
A lot of teams in the Atlantic got better. The Metro is absolutely stacked right now. And Kyle, I have to ask you one question.
Okay, last question.
How does it feel being a Flames fan picking the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup?
Did you throw up a little bit?
Did you somewhat die inside?
If there's anything that I've been my whole life is that I'm just trying to be realistic with everything. I'm not trying to be a homer like some of you bastards on this show, right?
Hey, wait a second. Hey, hold on.
What are we doing here?
That's the whole point of being a fan, man.
I know.
How do you think we got here? Come on.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
All right. Well, my beer's almost done, which means this show's almost done too. So appreciate you guys those showing up. It was a blast tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope to see more of you guys too, especially going into this season. And if you want to catch us tomorrow night too, we will be doing the Pacific Division tomorrow night to wrap it up before the season begins. So once again, thank you guys for coming on again. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all pretty soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take it easy, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Say something.